Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Did the 10th verse. Hristhale mana swasthata kriya Bhakti yoga bodhascha nischidam. So here Ramana Maharshi says, Hristhale manasvasthata. Manasvasthata, manasaha svasthata. Swasmin sthitihi svasthata. To be in one's own true nature. The true nature of mind also is consciousness. Because what are thoughts? Like waves. What are waves? The water taking different names and forms are called waves. Similarly also, thoughts are comparable to waves, you can say. Consciousness assuming different names and forms are called thoughts. So consciousness is just as water is the content of the waves, so also the consciousness is the content of the thoughts. So waves attaining its own state is waves attaining state of water, which it already is. So wave does not need to do something to attain the state of water. It has to know that I am water. By giving up all other notions about oneself, the recognition on the part of wave that I am water is a wave becoming water. The recognition on the part of the 10th man that I am 10th man is the 10th man abiding 10th man. So mind recognizing its nature as consciousness, then it can abide in consciousness with its nature. And that is the enlightened mind, recognizes mind or the ego that I am consciousness. And the self of all. This is Kriya, Bhakti, Yoga, Bodhasya, Nishchitam. This is the goal behind all these spiritual practices according to Ramana Maharshi. Where mind or the ego recognizes its true nature as consciousness, as formless, limitless. Whether Kriya, Bhakti, Yoga and Bodha, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, the Patanjali Yoga and Jnana are all thought to be separate paths, which some people believe. Then also each path leads to only one. The purpose of any spiritual practice is to reach this destination. Vedanta would say that the karma, bhakti, yoga are all means to knowledge. And the purpose of knowing is to know the true nature, that knowledge itself is abiding. It's not that a wave has to do something to abide in water. A wave thinks that I am wave, different from other waves and different from water. Just as I think that I am such an individual, different from other individuals, and different from Ishvara or Bhagavan or Brahman, the ignorance creates all these kinds of divisions. The recognition that I am not an individual entity, I am is the reality about me. It is reality for everything and everyone. Then there is no division left in my life, there is no exclusion left in the life, there is no rejection, nothing, and therefore I am completely comfortable. I am totally comfortable with myself and therefore comfortable with everything. So this is how the Bhakti Yoga has been briefly discussed by Ramana Maharshi. Next few verses Ramana Maharshi discusses the Patanjali Yoga briefly. As most of you are knowing, Patanjali Yoga, or what Swami Vivekananda ji called Raja Yoga, is Ashtanga Yoga, an 8-limbed yoga. Ashta means 8, Anga means limbs, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. These are the 8 stages, you can say, of development. The goal of this yoga is Samadhi. Samadhi means absorption. Something similar to what we have in the state of deep sleep. Except that in deep sleep there is the darkness of ignorance. Otherwise the mind is absorbed. So Samadhi is a conscious state where the mind is absorbed. That is called Samadhi or Laya. And Samadhi also has 2 stages. Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Samadhi is absorption with Vikalpa, where there is awareness, a very minute awareness of the knower known knowledge. That's called Vikalpa. That Vikalpa, the duality projection also does not remain. When that also subsides, all there is just consciousness or quietude, this is the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi, a state that is free from all the thoughts. Yoga Shastra says, Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam, and all the thoughts have ceased to be there, then drashta or the seer gains an abidance in his true nature. So Yoga Shastra believes that it is important that all the thoughts are completely stopped. It is called Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Nirodha means stoppage of all the thoughts. And that's called yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. The very first sutra, second sutra, defines what is meant by yoga. What's the goal of yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha. Nirodha, cessation of all the stoppage of all the thoughts. A state of thoughtlessness, a conscious state free from all the thoughts. For that, the yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi are all the stages. Of them, Ramana Maharshi mentions one, namely pranayama. Prana plus ayama becomes pranayama. Ayama means restraint, control. Pranayama means pranasya ayama, the restraint or control of prana or breathing. Technically, out breath is called prana, incoming breath is called apana. But pranayama is control of breathing. Breathing out, breathing in, control. We know that the breathing is an involuntary action that takes place by itself, by default. It takes place. Fortunately, we do not have to make any conscious effort to breathe. When that happens, then we have to go to doctor. But otherwise, when it takes place by itself. But then, what the yogis do is that they take the situation in their hand and control the breathing process. When we are breathing right now, there may be, say, 16 cycles of breathing in and out per minute. What is meant by restraining is that you make it 14, 15, 14, 12, 10, 5, 1. A yogi may breathe just once in 1 minute. Or he may stop breathing apparently also. This is called ayama, or a restraint of prana is possible. And here Ramana Maharshi mentions this one aspect of yoga, pranayama. And why is it so? So that is described in the next verse, verse 11. Also on the page 11. Vayurodhana liyate manaha jala pakshiva drodha sadhanam Vayu rodhanat. Vayu also means air. And what we call prana or breathing also is nothing but the modification of air. The external air alone becomes the prana. So rodhanam means controlling or stopping. So vayu rodhanat, by restraining the vayu, by restraining the breath. Liyate manaha, the mind gets absorbed. Meaning that the mind ultimately, not right away, but when one gains the sufficient control over the breathing, such that a person is able to essentially stop breathing and still survive. As the breathing quietens down, the mind also quietens down. And therefore, by controlling the breath, it is possible to quieten the mind. So this is a very important observation and use of this observation. How by controlling the gross you can control the subtle. Asana, by controlling the body you can control the prana, etc., subtle body. By controlling prana you control the mind. By controlling the mind you gain the knowledge. So from the gross to the subtle, from the physical to the physiological, this is how to psychological. That's how the progress takes place in the yoga, which is very wonderful. I mean, it's something unique contribution that the Vedic culture has to the whole universe. Jal pakshivat roda sadhanam. Pakshi means a bird. Jala means a net. Like catching a bird in a net. How the nature of birds to fly and flutter around. How by arresting, catching that bird in a net, how you prevent it from fluttering around. So mind is like a bird. Its nature is to flutter around. You catch the mind by something similar to a net. So pranayama is comparable to a net by which you can catch the bird of the nature of mind and prevent it from fluttering, meaning you can quieten the mind. So what is the reason why this happens? How is it that by controlling prana, controlling breathing, that we can control the mind? What is the reason? That is explained in the next verse. Chittavayavas chitkriya yutaha Shakayordvayi Shakti Mulaka. Chitta Vayavaha. Chitta means mind and Vayu means breath or prana. Chitta Vayavaha, the mind and the prana. Two faculties we have. So we have a mind, so we have a gross body, physical body. This body is kept alive by prana, by the life breath. Subtler than prana is the mind. Subtler than mind is the intellect. And subtler intellect is the self, Atma. So here Ramana Maharshi says, there's these two aspects of our personality, the mind and the prana, the breath. Both of them represent a particular kind of energy. We have Jnana Shakti, the power to know, Ichha Shakti, the power to desire, power to will, Kriya Shakti, power to act. So, prana and the mind together represent these powers. Prana is the power to act, and mind is the power to will and power to know. Mind includes the intellect. Chitta Vayavaha. Chitta means mind and Vayu means the breath. Chitta Vayavaha, the mind and the prana, the mind and the vital force. Chit Kriya Yutaha. Yutaha, they are endowed with, possessed of. Chit, consciousness, Kriya, the action. The simple thing Ramana Maharshi says that mind is possessed of the power to know, and power to will, and the prana is possessed of the power to act. The two different powers. Power to know and will, and power to act. Both are powers called Shakti. What is the relationship between them? Is there a relationship between the thinking and breathing? Breathing represents the power to act. Thinking represents the power to know or the power to will. Is there a relationship between them? Ramana Maharshi says yes. Shakhayoho dvai. They are in fact the two shakha, the two branches originating from the same stem. Imagine a tree with a stem from which two branches are emerging. Dvai shakhayoho dvai. These are the two branches. They have their mulaka, Shakti mulaka. They have their mula or the source or root in Shakti, in the basic power. So there is one power called Maya. Is the power to project, power to create. Maya is made up of three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. Sattva is characterized by the ability to know, rajas to act, and tamas is an inactivity. In predominance of sattva there is knowledge, in predominance of rajas there is activity, predominance of tamas there is inactivity. So sattva means knowledge, so power to know is one power, rajas activity, power to act is another power. So these are two powers which have the same origin called Prakriti or Maya. What the scientists call energy. We call it power, Shakti, Prakriti, primordial matter, the Maya, the projecting power, with the help of which Ishvara creates the universe, creates, sustains, dissolves. So one Shakti of this, there are two branches. One Shakti is the Jnana Shakti, power to know, power to will is one branch called Chitta or Manaha. Other is the power to act called the Kriya Shakti, which is the power of the Prana. So Manaha the mind and Prana the breath. One represents the power to know and will, other represents the power to act. Both these powers or Shaktis have their origin in one, namely the Prakriti, the original power, the Maya. So imagine Maya is like a stem, which two branches are coming out. One branch is the mind, power to know and power to will. Other is the Prana, the power to act. Therefore, if you lower one branch, because they are connected in the root or mula, other branch also will be affected. If you lower one branch, other branch also will come down. Therefore, if you control the prana, then mind also will be controlled. Because prana and mind, both of them have the origin in one power called Maya. And therefore, by controlling one, you can control the other. That is the principle that Yoga Shastra employs for controlling the mind. It is difficult to control the mind. But it is relatively easier to control the breath. Because breathing can be made a deliberate action. Right now, breathing is not a deliberate action. Breathing is something very gross, and therefore we can deliberately establish a pattern of breathing to our choice. And so, pranayama. See, they explain to us that breathing out, when you breathe out, the lungs get emptied. That is called rechaka. Rechaka means emptying out. You breathe in, then the lungs get filled. That is called puraka. When you stop breathing, not breathing out, not breathing in, is called kumbhaka. That is called the restraining the breath, stopping the breath. Rechaka, breathing out, puraka, filling in, kumbhaka, stopping. This goes on automatically, by the way. Even now also, we are breathing out, the lung gets empty, hopefully, it depends on how effective you're breathing. They don't. And they don't get filled up also. Lots of parts of the lungs, they don't come into function. And that's how different problems are there. But that's why they teach us the breathing exercises to fill all the lungs and empty the lungs, etc. But filling the lungs, puraka, emptying the lungs, rechaka, and neither filling nor emptying, stopping the breath is called kumbhaka. That kumbhaka will have two types. You breathe in, fill the lungs, and retain the breath and not allow it to come out. That's called antah kumbhaka, the inner kumbhaka. You breathe out and keep it out and do not allow it to come. It is called bahi kumbhaka, outer kumbhaka. This is going on right now. You breathe in, there is a gap in between where there is no breathing in and out, there is kumbhaka. A very short spell of kumbhaka is there. You breathe out, so between breathing out, there is some little gap. Outer kumbhaka is there. So this is taking place on its own. Now we impose a desired pattern on this. So 1:4 some proportions are given by the Yoga Shastra. Breathing in 1 unit of time, retaining 4 units of time, breathing out 2 units of time, just a pattern, well-known pattern. So now you consciously breathe. You consciously breathe in for whatever unit of time or number of seconds, retain it for 4 times the time. So if you breathe in 2 seconds, retain for 8 seconds, breathe out in 4 seconds. So this is how slowly the breathing pattern is brought under your control. We start controlling the breathing and slowly we can increase that time of breathing in and retaining longer and longer and longer and longer. The yogis can retain in such a manner that all breathing stops for quite some time. Now, since the mind and the breath are two branches of the same energy, they have the same root, therefore, by controlling the breath, we are automatically controlling the mind. So mind gets controlled by the control of breath. That's a wonderful thing, because controlling mind itself is very difficult. Breathing is more gross, and therefore it's much easier to control the breathing and do it only under supervision of some, person who is knowledgeable person. But this is it. This is what in summary Ramana Maharshi talks about. The purpose of the yoga is to control the mind, and by controlling prana, we can control the mind. If prana stops, the mind stops. And so mind gets stopped or absorption, that's called laya or samadhi. therefore, the next verse tells us, on the page 12, Laya Vinashane Ubhairodhane Laya Gatam Punar Bhavati No Mrutam. Now, when the mind has absorbed, has laya, laya means mind is merged, let us say. Just as in deep sleep is a state of laya where the mind merges, this is in wakeful state also the mind merges, because slowly by controlling breathing also we have slowed down the thinking process to such an extent that the thinking then stops. That process is called Samadhi. You call it Laya, absorption or Samadhi, where the mind has merged into its cause. It is an experience of great peace or silence. It is even an experience of non-duality as in the deep sleep. So Laya. So now this comes from the Yoga Vasishtha, where this is discussed in great detail. Laya and Vinasha. Mano Laya, Mano Vinasha. The absorption or merger of the mind and the distraction of the mind. Vinasha. So, Mano Laya, the mind absorbs, so it is not destroyed, but Mano Nasha, the mind is destroyed. Now, when you hear that, then you get nervous, the mind gets destroyed, and what happens to this person? Does it become mindless? That is not what is meant by distraction in the primary sense. That for a yogi, it is not that mind is destroyed, it becomes a mindless person. But mind no more has any problem, no more ignorance is left in the mind. It's an enlightened mind. So one can experience Samadhi, but in Samadhi, when the mind comes out of Samadhi, it remains the same ignorant mind, meaning that Samadhi does not eliminate ignorance. Whereas the next verse will tell us that the vichara or deliberating upon nature of the self removes ignorance. Laya vinashane ubhaya rodhane. Rodhanam, control. Ubhaya rodhanam, the control is of two kinds, laya and vinasha. Laya, when the mind is absorbed, is lean or merged, and vinasha, when the mind is destroyed. Meaning the ignorance of the mind is destroyed. Mind as faculty does not get destroyed, because mind itself is not a problem. Ignorance is a problem. So what we want is ignorance to be destroyed. Now ignorance does not get destroyed by itself, ignorance gets destroyed by knowledge. How does knowledge take place? By the deliberation by vichara as to what is the nature of self, what's the nature of Brahma. This is what Upanishad carries out. Meaning that by the vichara or deliberation upon the teaching of Upanishad, as we have been discussing, the ignorance gets destroyed, and therefore that becomes an enlightened mind. A mind just enjoying samadhi or absorption or merger doesn't become enlightened, it becomes quiet, and there are many advantages of that. But in itself that is not enough. In fact, the mind should know the truth about itself, truth about the self. And when that ignorance is, then all complexes are destroyed basically. as we've been discussing all these days, our problem, mind is not the problem, life is not the problem, nothing is the problem according to Vedanta. Only problem is that the various complexes that we entertain about ourselves. I am so and so. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm happy, I'm unhappy, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm successful, I'm not. All these kind of complexes I entertain. That is because of identification of this body, mind, sense complex. Therefore, what is the nature of body? I took it as my nature, I call myself a man or woman or tall and short. The happiness, unhappiness is the mind, I'm happy, I'm unhappy. So this is by default happening, the identification. And from that all these different notions are arising and they create a sense of limitation and they create sorrow. So recognizing that this is not right, what I take myself to be is not right, then what is the reality? But that's what Upanishad teaches, that's what Vedanta teaches us. So thus by what we call the Vedanta vichara or deliberation upon what the Vedanta teaches, then we realize the true nature of the self, then the ignorance is called manonasa, the destruction of the ignorant mind. So here Ramana Maharshi says that there are these two stages or two states, two kinds of merger. One is simple merger, second is an enlightenment. Second line says, Layagatam punarbhavati no mrutam. Layagatam, even if you have the state of samadhi or absorption, the mind, when it comes out, the ignorance doesn't go. Ignorance cannot go by an experience, ignorance goes by understanding. That understanding is given to us by Upanishads, by Vedanta. So understanding does not arise from an experience, understanding arises by understanding the experience. That's an important point that the Vedantins make. It is not an experience that makes you enlightened, it is by understanding the experience that makes you enlightened. Experience comes when the mind is absorbed, but only when we understand what is the nature of that experience, who experiences, what is experienced, what's the nature of experiencer. When we pay attention to this, then we understand the nature of the self. Layagatam punarbhavati, a mind that has merged comes out again as ignorant mind only, no mrutam, but the mind that is enlightened, the ignorance does not come back again. So how should we now use this experience of laya? By controlling prana, you control the mind and the mind becomes very quiet. Then how do you use that experience? So next verse is prana bandhana lina manasam eka chintana nashametyadaha. Adaha. It is traditionally in Sanskrit that we pronounce the visarga completely. How the visarga is pronounced depends upon what precedes visarga, what follows visarga, etc. But at the end of the vakya, eka chintana nashametyadaha. Adah. We don't say adaha. Eka chintana nashamet. So prana bandhana lina manasam, the manasam or mind, which is lina, which is merged, absorbed, which enjoys that quietude. Then the mind becomes a contemplative mind. When the mind is restless, it cannot really contemplate or see things as they are. It's a projecting mind. When the mind becomes quiet, it no more projects, then it is ready to understand. The projecting mind and a seeing mind. Usually the mind has a tendency to project things. You and I, first projection. I am so and so is a projection, so you are so and so is the projection. So usually mind is a projecting mind. When the mind becomes quiet in this manner, it becomes a learning mind. Learning mind, seeing mind. So Ramana says, use that mind now for Atma Vichara. Pranabandhana leena manasam. When the mind thus becomes quiet, due to pranayama or by any other reason. So that is why we have antahkarana shuddhi. The purification of mind, that is the process that we follow. How does the mind become pure? By the right attitudes. What is impurity of mind? Wrong attitudes. For the first attitude, the self-centeredness is a primarily wrong attitude. That makes the mind restless, mind extrovert. And therefore, we deliberately impose the attitude of selflessness as much as we can. Mind generally has this pride or arrogance, therefore humility is the value. Mind, when it is wrong, wants to retaliate, therefore kshama, the forgiveness is the value. Mind, when it gets angry, then it hurts, then compassion is the value. So thus, by the right values and attitudes, we consciously, when we practice, then this reacting tendencies of the mind also become quiet. That's our process we follow. So what we discussed so far, karma yoga, bhakti, is a process by which we attain the purity of mind, and as mind becomes pure or free from this reaction, it becomes quiet. So what we seek, purification of mind, quietening of the mind, contemplativeness of the mind, cheerfulness of the mind, clarity of the mind. When we gain that mind, here it is gained by pranayama. Our process is by right attitude and values and bhakti. Second line says, Eka chintanat nasham eti adaha. Adaha. Ada means that mind, nasham eti, attains a state of nasha or distraction by eka chintanat, by chintanam, the deliberation upon eka or one non-dual. Meaning that now when the mind has become quiet, it has a leisure now, and thereby it becomes contemplative. It is now ready to understand things. Otherwise we want to do things and we want to achieve things, and so that time mind is not ready to understand. When mind becomes free from the restlessness, from the need to do things, from the need to run out, need to experience, need to enjoy, when it becomes free from all of that, sattvic mind, quiet mind, becomes a contemplative mind. Then use that mind, eka chintanat, by chintanam, contemplating on one non-dual self. That is what Vedanta teaches. What does Vedanta tell us? Tattvamasi. That thou art. Hey, you are limitless. See that fact? The mind is too busy and too active to see the fact. It is taken for granted that I am no good, I am limited, I am inadequate, and therefore it keeps fluttering with activities. When the mind becomes quiet, then it has the leisure, the poise. Well, recognize who you are first before you do anything. You want to be happy, recognize, are you happy or unhappy? Recognize who you are. This quiet mind has now the poise to be able to deliberate as to what I am and what the nature of things are. It no more projects that individuality upon itself, no more projects the division upon other things. He is able to see what is. Then Upanishad teaches that what is one. Eka chintanat. There are not many. What do you mean there are not many? There are so many here, there are countless entities here. How do you say there is one? There are countless entities, all right. There are countless waves. And still there is one, is it not so? The countless waves are there in the ocean. In spite of the countlessness of waves, still there is one, is it not so? What is that? Water. But the wave is so preoccupied that I'm a wave, I must do something, I fight with that, I must. So therefore, it fails to see its true nature. When it stops fighting, stops running around, becomes quiet, poised, then it can see the fact that, hey, wave is a name and form, but what is my content? I am water in a name and form is called a wave. What is wave? Water with a given name and form. All these waves, what are they? They are all water with different names and forms. So there is something different between you and I. What's the difference? In the name and form, but not in the content. What is one ocean of consciousness. And what are we? The same consciousness manifesting in different names and forms. That's what we are. So what I perceive is many, that's called perception, called pratiti. I recognize that in and through the many, what is one. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsu vinashyantam yaf pashyati sapashyati, says Lord Krishna. Sarveshu bhuteshu samam, all the beings, that which is samam, which is the same, most common denominator, which is common to everybody. Lord Krishna also gives the example, Sutre Maniganaya, just as there are so many beads are there, in all of them one thread sustains them all. So beads are many, names and forms are many, but the thread that sustains all is one. We can see that when we give up the preoccupation with this name and form. We are so strongly attached to that, so strongly identified with it. That's my individuality. So that's the thing, my individuality. And you need it up to a point, but then we have to get out of that also. You establish individuality, identity in Vyavahara for a certain purpose. Ultimately, we have to become free from this identity. In the beginning, identity enables us, empowers us to do things. Ultimately, that identity limits us, binds us. So recognizing sarveshu bhuteshu samam, the one, that which is samam, same, equal, common, universal in all the beings, which are all different, perishable, imperishable among the perishable, one among many, same among dissimilar. This mind can see. When the mind has become seeing mind, contemplative mind, you can call it a tranquil mind, a pure mind. Eka chintanat, by contemplating upon chintanam, contemplating upon eka, one, among many. Right now I see many and miss that one. I see various ornaments and miss the gold. That's what is happening. I see many waves and miss the water. And so, it does require a mind which is poised and tranquil, then it can recognize that, hey, not only the ornament is there is gold very much there. In all changing ornaments, there is changeless gold. In many ornaments, there is one gold, changeless gold. Thus, in all the names and forms, there is one non-dual, changeless consciousness, which is I, Eka Chintanat. Adaha Nasameti, that is when the ignorance of the mind becomes dispelled. So Vedanta is very clear. Ignorance doesn't go by some process, by some experience. Ignorance goes only by vichara, by the contemplation upon the nature of reality. So use that mind which has gained that state of merger or quietude. That is not the goal, that is the means. That mind now you utilize to contemplate upon what is the nature of the self, what is the nature of yourself. What you see are all certainly the body, mind, sense complex, the names and forms. Even you are also names and name and form, but is that your reality? Or something that is non-changing in names and forms is the reality. This will come later on also. Eka Chintana. Thus when the mind sees Eka, then ignorance of giving reality to this many goes away. When it sees that one is the real. Adaha nasameti, the mind becomes destroyed, meaning that the ignorance of minds becomes destroyed. So this is how the pranayama process is utilized to take advantage. Now this is an observation that the Kriya Shakti, the Prana and the Jnana Shakti, the mind are branches of the same energy or Maya and they have the same root. And therefore it is possible to control one by the other. Today also we know, when mind becomes agitated, the breath also becomes agitated. Breath becomes agitated, mind also becomes agitated. So therefore, take advantage of the relationship and control one by controlling the other. Thus, by this vichara or contemplation, one will attain mano nasa, the destruction of the mind, meaning the destruction of the ignorance of the mind. He is called a yogi and he is described in the next verse. The verse 15. Nashta manasotkrishta yogina krityamasti kim swasthitim yatah. Nashta manasa, now we know Nashta manasa is who? One whose manasa, the mind, is nashtam, is destroyed. Meaning one whose ignorance is destroyed or dispelled by knowledge. Utkrishta yogina. He is an exalted yogi. There is one yogi who enjoys the merger absorption of the mind is a yogi. Who has managed to stop all the thoughts, that's a yogi. But this is a greater, a more exalted yogi, one who has recognized the truth and therefore possesses an enlightened mind. Utkrishta yogi, there are yogis of different categories. Thus, an enlightened man, a person is called Utkrishta yogi. A person enjoying, but tranquility of mind is yogi, no doubt, self-control. But the one who has a knowledge, that is Utkrishta Yogi, greatest yogi, whose ignorance is destroyed in the wake of knowledge. What about that person? Suppose, then what do you get in your life? What's the goal? Suppose you have the knowledge and therefore ignorance is dispelled. So then what happens to you? Second line says, Krutyamastikim swasthitim yataha. Yataha. One who has attained swasthitim yataha. Yogina is the sixth case of yat. Ya means to go. So yataha, one who has gone or one who has attained, becomes the present participle, the sixth case of that. So swasthitim yataha, one who has attained his sthiti, he has attained the natural state, one who abides in his own self. You all abide in the self, but one who knows, that I abide in myself. One cannot really go away from the self anyway. This ornament, however hard it tries, it cannot run away from gold. Can the bangle run away from the gold? What will happen? If the bangle runs away from gold, what will happen to bangle? What is bangle without gold? Is there a bangle? Can bangle ever avoid gold? Run away from gold? Create distance from gold? So bangle doesn't have to become gold, understand? It will recognize that I am gold, that's all. This bangle is running around searching for gold. Bangle is running around searching for gold. And so, what is that Kabir's doha is there? कपड़ा ढूंढे सूत नहर ढूंढे लहर को कपड़ा ढूंढे सूत जीव ढूंढे ब्रह्म को तीनों ऊत के ऊत लहर ढूंढे नहर को the wave is searching for water कपड़ा ढूंढे सूत the cloth is searching for cotton the cloth searching for cotton. Can you ever get it? The wave searching for water. The wave searching for water, when does the search come about? When wave takes for granted that I am different from water and water is different from me, then only the question of search for water can come. Is it not so? This bangle searching for gold, when can that search happen? When bangle presumes that I am not gold. So, Tino Oot, all these three fellows are fools. Jiva Dhude Brahma ko. Jiva is searching for Brahman, his own self. And so, what is meant by the bangle attaining its own state is not that bangle has to attain the state of gold, which it always is. Bangle has to recognize that I am gold, that's all. But why, Swami? Because somehow the bangle has thought that I am silver or I am something else. Why? By default. By habit. Bengal thinks that I am just a name and form, that's all I am. Not silver, name and form, that's all I am. And different from the other. So this is another name and form. I am different from this I am different from that. There is some difference at some level in name and form, but content is the same. So even if ab acha bandhi nahi mujhe, wow, I'm tied up. Right. Wow. All right. this is earring. I don't have a smaller one, but the nose ring is the smallest one. And this poor thing has a great complex when in front of this. It's so big and so shapely and look at me how I am. And nose ring is, is very small and its shape is also not wonderful. Just this is at least a nice shape and shining, but nose ring, big complex. When nose ring looks at this wristband, looks at the bangle, suffers from smallness, suffers from insignificance, suffers from lack of attention. Because it thinks that I am a name and form. All that is necessary is for that little nose ring to recognize that I am gold. Then what? Then I am the self of all. As gold, I am the self of bangle, self of wristband, self of earring, self of in a chain. That is a shift that is required, that's all. The shift that is required is for the small little ornament to recognize that I am gold. So Swami, what's the big deal about it? Is it big deal? It's a big deal. For me to recognize that I am simple being, no, I am something, that is, I am taking satisfaction from being something, that's my problem. To recognize that I am nothing or I am a simple little being, so there is no excitement. What is the big deal about being simple? Does not turn me on, doesn't excite me. Then I am something. Not recognize that somethingness only is binding me. Becomes simpler and simpler and simpler and simpler until the individuality drops. When the individuality of the small ornament drops, then recognize it, that I am gold, because goldness cannot drop away, understand? It's something that can never be erased, isn't it? So life becomes simpler and simpler and simpler and non-demanding, more and more content. That's the value. Less and less identification. Give up things, give up identifications. Become a contributor. This is the process. I don't say that you give up everything, but at least the possessiveness we can give up. So becoming simpler and non-demanding is a process of discovering the self that is simpler than simplest. Of discovering my true nature which is most non-demanding. Because Lord Krishna says, I am equally present in everybody. In Lord Rama and Ravana also I am equally present. They are all same to me. I don't hate Ravana. I am not partial to Rama also. All of them are same to me. Samaham sarvabhuteshu. That simple Bhagavan is. He's not partial. He does not discriminate. Does not matter to him whether he is a saint or a sinner. Equally abides as a self. If we become that simple, that is when we can gain a knowledge of the one that is common in saint and sinner. If sinner means I don't look at it, I hate it, then already I have created division. Which is maybe the case right now. But we have to, that is called freedom from raga-dvesha. That something does not create dvesha in me, I hate it. Aversion. Something creates attachment. When mind becomes free from, then only it can see what is it not so? When I hate something, I have stopped looking at it, then I can't understand that. When I attach partial, also I can't understand. Anyway, so this is how Utkrishta Yogi. This wise person is called Utkrishta Yogi, for which yoga became a means. Karma became a means earlier, bhakti became a means earlier, Yoga becomes a means now. Kriya bhakti yoga yoga bodha nishchitam. So here how yoga becomes the means of knowledge, we will continue discussion on this. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamada Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.